Our latest venture in woodworking has been to make wooden rings, not rings made strictly with wood, but wooden rings with metal cores. The first attempt was to watch the Craft Supply USA video on making their comfort style rings and follow their method. I ordered several ring cores in stainless steel and the much lighter titanium from Craft Supply USA with an assortment of stabilized wood ring blanks. To follow the procedure, I prepared a glue block and mounted it on the headstock. I then used double-sided tape to attach the wood ring blank to the glue block. I found the center of the blank and holding it against the live center on the tailstock, I used the tailstock to force the blank against the tape, thus keeping the wood blank as centered as possible on the glue block. I then retracted the tailstock and removed the live center. I started the lathe and turned the blank to roughly a round shape. I installed a Jacob's chuck with the live center, and with a properly sized Forstner bit, I drilled a hole in the center of the ring blank just a little smaller than the required size to house the metal ring core. The lathe was turned on and the blank faced off and the hole enlarged to fit the ring core I would use. When I was satisfied that the hole was the right size, I removed the blank, used thick super glue to glue in the core, and then using a ring mandrel, I turned the ring blank down to final thickness. I made two sizes, one for my son and one for his wife. I finished the wood with a mixture of shellac and wax and buffed it on a buffing wheel. Then off to the mail to Hawaii. Oops, forgot that they may be exposed to severe temperature changes. So when they got the rings, the cores had popped loose from the wood. Should have followed directions and used epoxy. For the second method, I kind of deviated from the way Craft Supply did it, and I took the ring blanks, marked their centers, set them up between centers, and basically turned them round, making it a little larger than the wood would need to be for the ring that I was making. This way I could process quite a few of these at one time. And here you see one of them, one of the blanks after I turned it round. And I basically did that for all the blanks that I had. And here you can see the different types of wood that I used. Now this is stabilized wood, and I found through some experimentation that stabilized wood or acrylics are the best materials to use for this ring making. If you use unstabilized wood, there's a good chance it's going to crack. I haven't used all these blanks yet. Purchased all these from Craft Supply. Next thing I did was take one of these rounded blanks and chuck it up in a 4-jaw chuck. And then with a Forstner bit, I was able to drill a hole through the center of the blank. I made sure the hole was a little smaller than the smallest ring size that I was going to be working with. As probably most of you know, when you're drilling with a Jacob's chuck like this, you need to keep your hand on it because there's a possibility that when you're moving it in and out of the workpiece that it could jump out of the tailstock and things could get nasty in a hurry. I'm using a jet mini lathe for this particular project. I usually roll this outside in the driveway so it's easy to clean up, but we've had so much rain recently that it's made it very difficult to work outside. There you can see the hole drilled through the blank. Now I take a boring bar, I put the blank back into the chuck, and what I'm going to do now with the boring bar is to enlarge that hole to the exact dimension that I need to house the blank, or excuse me, the core. What I've done is ordered several split cores or two-part cores from Craft Supply USA and also ringsupplies.com. I've gotten all of those in titanium because it makes a much lighter ring. Here you can see I'm using some vernier calipers to check the inside diameter to see how close I need to get. This is pretty important with these snap type two-part ring cores because they have to fit in there snugly but then also be able to snap together. Most of these ring blanks were almost twice the thickness that I needed for any of the rings that I was going to make, so it was possible for me to take these to the bandsaw, and with another jig that I had made for splitting round pieces in two, I was able to take these ring blanks and split them to the right dimension that I needed for the ring that I was working with. The part that was left over was usually thick enough that I could still use it for one of the other ring blanks, one of the thinner ring blanks. These cores come in sizes anywhere from 2 up to 6 millimeters in thickness. Okay, so the boring bar has done its job. By the way, I got the boring bar from ringsupplies.com. Now you've kind of skipped ahead a little bit here. I've already epoxied the core into the wood ring blank. I've mounted it on an expanding ring chuck, special chuck that's sold by ringsupply.com. It allows you to fit different size ring on the expanding collet, expand it to hold it in place while you turn it down to the final dimension. And here you can see I'm using a carbide finishing tool to turn down the wood to the final thickness. Now you'll see me in this next section of the video using some Abernet sandpaper, and in this case I'm using a 80 grit sanding pad. And I've found that if I do this occasionally while I'm turning these blanks, that it takes a little bit of the stress away from turning such a thin piece of wood. Allows me to take off some of the wood very easily with the sanding pad, and then I can go back with the cutting tool and take off a little bit more wood. And between using this turning tool and the Abernet, I'm able to get it down to the right size. With the split cores, you can actually take it right down to the metal, and you may end up shaving a little bit of the metal off, but that's okay. In the final steps, you can polish it up and finish it, and it looks really nice. So once it's turned down like this, you can then go ahead and apply whatever finish you're going to use. I used a shellac wax finish and then buffed it. You could use CA, and I'll probably do that on some future rings. And what you don't see is that when I finally get it down to where it's just a little bit proud of the metal rims on the ring cores, I then take the Abernet and I work through all the grits up to 400 grit. And then I use an abrasive paste, and then I apply the shellac and wax finish. and buff it on a buffing wheel. I'm probably making this look a lot harder than it really is, because the first couple that I made, I was really careful, went very slowly because I'd blown some of them up. Here's one of the rings that I'd made earlier, and that was just with a solid core, not a split core. And that was a pink ivory wood on that. I gave that ring to my wife. Probably not a good idea to leave the boring bar in place while you're doing some of this, but I was working from the side, so I really didn't have to worry about my elbow hitting it. Here's some of the finished rings that I made using the split cores. You can get all sizes that you can imagine, from size 4 all the way up. I think the largest ones I had were like 10.5, and I had some that were as small as 4. And I just slipped this one over one of my fingers so you can take a look at it.